Guilarte, yeah.
Guilarte, got it. Does Krimitso say it right then, or does he say it wrong?
No, he likes them. He destroys me.
Oh, all right. Well, I just had to take my sweatshirt off for this session with Niel Guilarte.
Yeah, I mean, I literally get up in meetings and just say I'm Chris's friend. I don't even bother. And he always gets mad at me for doing that.
Good old Kremitzos. Can't wait to see him next week. But let's get this party started. Without further stuff, go! Oh my goodness! And Neil, feel free to grunt at the beginning of this session too. Yes, thank you.
I was waiting for the invite.
That's right. Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. My name's Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for the likes of Forbes, Dun & Bradstreet, E+, a lot of others. Every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk shop with people who are really technical and really experienced. And today's just going to be tremendous, actually. I have a background in audio engineering in the music business. And since I entered podcasting about 6 years ago, I noticed a huge lack of audio skills in podcasting. Not just podcasters, but podcast producers as well. So that's where this show can help. And if you implement the best of what you learn here, you know what's going to happen. Your podcasts will sound a lot better, and you'll spend less time producing them. Of course, Barry is with me here. Let me just fade that out. And Barry, you ready?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's right. He's here. Barry, you know everybody loves your voice, right, Barry?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm telling you. All right, well, Barry is, of course, the maintenance guy in my old building who hangs with me on the show. Barry, how come you don't have a podcast?
That's a mystery.
I know. Anyway, I got to mention quickly, before we get to Niel Guilarte, the Podcast Engineering School. Just go to podcastengineeringschool.com. If you or someone you know wants to learn how to produce podcasts professionally and earn serious money, either part-time or full-time, that's what Podcast Engineering School is all about. I'm the lead instructor. There's all kinds of details on the website. Check it out. But it's serious. It's not cheap, but it's serious. So anyway, and you probably already knew that if you're a regular listener. But anyway, Niel Guilarte, welcome, brother.
Hey. I'm over here recovering from some kind of a neck crank because when that music came on, I started jamming hard, and I was like, ow.
Dude, ow. You're the founder of Wildstyle Media, and I always like looking at your Instagram account. It's pretty cool, man. You post a lot of cool stuff. I love that.
Thanks, man.
Links in the show notes to all this stuff. You do high-end video production, film, podcast production, and editing, and also audio for gaming. And so the website's wildstylemedia.net. Of course, link will be in the show notes. And you worked on The Messenger. Well, you were the man behind The Messenger's documentary.
I directed it. I edited. I shot a lot of it.
I was going to say, dude, you worked
services.
on it. You worked on 98% of it.
Yeah, that was an awesome project. Shout out to Chris Kremitzos for giving us all that opportunity to work on that.
Yeah. And you're also the host of a podcast called All Things Post, and it's all about post-production. Not only audio, but video, but anything post, right?
Yeah, anything that's the behind the scenes of any type of creative project. But primarily, we get a lot of audio and video editors. So that's kind of the creme of the creme. But we do move into all different types of stuff. It's a great show. It actually took a small hiatus, but it's back. It actually launches this Monday with Danny Pena of Gamertag Radio.
Oh, cool. So you have a deep and rich history in audio and video, and I want to we'll get to that as we go. But let's start with the speed round, all right? 60 seconds you have to explain to us briefly, like let's say you're about to get ready to do a podcast, you got your mic, and just tell us what mic it is, where it's plugged in, what you're running through, and then like what software you're using. Just basically overview the whole process real quick.
All right, 60 seconds. I use a Rode Procaster mic, and I run it into a brand new Focusrite Clarett 8 Pre that I just got, a new interface. I like to record in Logic by Apple, and I use Logic Pro X. I also use a Behringer X-touch automated fader awesome controller, and that's about it as far as the generic podcasting gear. That 60 seconds pretty good?
That was good, man. But wait, so what do you record it on?
Oh, well, I record I go through the interface right into Logic Pro.
Oh, you do?
Normally
Okay.
my podcast, I record right into the DAW.
Okay.
And if I do mobile, then I'd use a Tascam recorder.
Oh, you have a Tascam for mobile. And so,
yeah.
And then, okay, Logic Pro, then that's where you do, obviously, all your post-production, right?
Also the editing as well, yeah.
And then you mix it down to...
That probably wasn't as impressive as you were probably hoping.
No, dude. There's avenues, what do I want to say? There's a lot of avenues we're going to stroll down in this interview. It's not just this, your signal chain of your one mic, dude. Right? So then you, right out of Logic Pro, is that where you create the final MP3?
Yeah, literally. I do everything in Logic. I'm still an Apple fanboy.
Okay. And so you don't use Auphonic or anything?
No, I do. I'm not sure if you know about our company. We do edit most of the podcasts for the Horse Radio Network, and they actually use Auphonic extensively. So when we make them the final, then they run it through Auphonic for final. They want to be able to balance it or level it out. But on top of what we did. But for me, no, I do everything in Logic, like you do, old audio mixing, good old-fashioned, old-school way.
Right.
Keep it kind of simple.
Yeah. So that's cool. That I didn't know you actually did a lot for the Horse Radio Network, Glenn the Geek.
Yeah. Actually, we met at Podfest, and then he was looking for someone to edit the shows. We were just wanting to start doing podcast editing after All Things Post did pretty good. And so I asked for the opportunity, and then he introduced me to Auphonic. He was like, hey, we use it for our final basically polish before it goes out to their audience. So everything we do gets ran through there in the end, and then it goes out. But on my stuff, I literally do everything. I'm just more careful recording into my interface, and then I, real careful with my mixing. And I'm still just very old school. I've been doing audio mixing for quite a while.
Cool. So you got a Rode Procaster, and that's an XLR mic, right?
Yeah, it's an XLR mic, and it's a lot like the ones they use in sort of radio stations. We talked a little bit offline, but yeah, it's always had a little bit of a low volume situation going on, but it's a great mic, very warm. I like how it sounds for my voice particularly. So I really, really like this mic. Prior to this, I think I had like a Audio Technica. I just don't remember the exact model number.
So yeah, the Procaster is XLR, and the one below that, or should I say less expensive than that, is the Rode Podcaster.
The white one, yeah.
Okay, that's the white one, and that's USB only.
Right.
Got it. And so the one above yours would be the Rode Broadcaster.
Yes, which one day when I grow up, maybe now being on your show will qualify me to get one of those, right, Rode?
Geez.
Right, Rode?
Yes.
I use Rode mics. Funny, I use Rode for everything. I'm not trying to just, call out to Rode, wink, wink, but, the entire Messengers was recorded with a Rode wireless mic. So I use the Rode boom mic. So I'm just a big fan of Rode. They make amazing, awesome microphones.
Right. That's very common. People who work on like video production, obviously on location most of the time, love Rode products, everything Rode.
Well, they're made to last. Like I went to Guatemala for the Messengers and also Puerto Rico, and that poor wireless was stepped on by a horse. It fell down a ravine. It was, our drone got caught in a tree and all of that stuff, and that thing still worked.
Right? That's awesome. So Focusrite Clarett 8 Pre, that has 8, that's your audio interface. It has 8 XLR inputs, right?
Yeah, I was on a 2i2 for the longest time. When I first started podcasting, I was obviously like everybody trying to do it affordably. I recognized right away I needed at least a decent interface. So I started off with the Red Studio 2i2.
Right.
It's done its job. It was only about a month or two ago, because I started building out more of a production studio for video and for music projects, that I felt like I needed more inputs, a little bit more control. And the one thing about the Clarett 8 is that it has this feature called air. So for microphones like this one that tend to be a little bit, bottom end's a little bit high, they're very bassy. When you apply the air feature, it tends to mimic other previous microphones from back in the day, in the Focusrite days, and you get a little bit better sounding mic. Sound. So I bought it for that reason primarily.
Right, so the air, I'm assuming it adds like some nice high-end clarity, right?
Yeah, it's exactly what all it's for. It just kind of adds a little bit of clarity, and then you could always still go in and use plugins and mix it any way you want. But I think it takes a mic like this and quote-unquote fixes it, so I have to do a little bit less in post as far as processing.
Right. I just saw some shootout of three interfaces. One of them was, I think it was the Focusrite Clarett 8 Pre, but it might have been, is there one that they make that's like an 8 Pre X or something?
Yeah, there's one just above mine, and they just recently released their entire USB version. Mine's Thunderbolt, which is another reason I bought it was to have the less latency. But yeah, I might have seen that as well. What you're talking about as far as putting those three up against each other. I'm a Focusrite fan because I'm not sure if you're this way, Chris, but I'm a person like when I've done this for 26, 27 years. If it works, I stick with them.
Right.
And I've worked in recording studios with Mo2 and every, UA audio, every type of interface ever made. Right. Friends of mine that have recording studios, hip hop producers, they all have every interface ever made. Right. I just love the way Focusrite preamps sound. I just think that you can get a lot out of the box. And then if you do know what you're doing, you can take it to another level without having to be a full-blown engineer if you haven't had that opportunity to go to school for that.
Right.
So I just think that they give you a great sound right out of the box.
Yeah. So the 8 Pre, the one that you have, is an 18x20 Thunderbolt interface.
Yes.
And it's a 1 rack space unit. Then the next one up from that is called the 8 Pre X. Yours is about $900. The 8 Pre X is about $1,100.
Yeah.
And that's the one that I saw in a shootout with the Universal Audio Apollo 8P. And
yeah, I had to get this one because I didn't get famous enough with the movie, so I had to stay on the. I went from a 2i2 that cost me like $150 to $900, and my wife literally lost it. She goes, "What does it do for the other $700 that I'm going to hear?"
Oh my God!
You know how wives are. God bless her.
Right.
But like you're saying, yeah, I think I saw that roundup that you're talking about. But all in all, this thing probably is overkill, right? I use it for not just podcasting. Obviously, we bring instrumentation and stuff in here for making custom music, but it's become my go-to for everything. And well, I'm doing it now, so hopefully it sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds good. And yeah, look, if you're doing audio production, like having 8 XLR inputs is just handy, right? Just sometimes you need to plug in 5 or 6 things and.
Or you need to look really cool when your friends come over and you don't use any of them, but you're like, yeah, man, I could take your whole band, buddy. And then tomorrow he leaves in your one chain, like you said, one single chain.
Yeah. Like a little iRig or something.
Come on. Raise your hands if you didn't build your studio because some of the lights were just damn cool, right?
Oh, man. Totally. Yeah, so right. And the mic pre's are so vital to recording.
Oh, yeah.
It's...
I never valued them, coming up and, as a young filmmaker, like I said, I used to love music. I DJ'd and stuff, but I never really learned the gear, right? You just did it because you wanted to meet girls. And so once I got past that and found the girl, which pretty much omitted every other girl. But seriously, once you get into gear, everybody could be I have friends that buy gear. They're just gear heads, right? It's just a brand new toy. I want to get it. I really just go by, does it have ease of use? Does it do the job? Because today, as you very well know, inside of a DAW, there are so many third-party plugins that can take it the rest of the way. Right. But I think a lot of people don't realize the power of preamps and how they can really warm your vocal and just give you that pro sound if you're trying to go next level with whether it's be your podcast or your radio show. I mean, I've been in a lot of radio stations that use this particular one. So, I just wanted to get something that was sort of industry awesome, but that I also loved how it worked.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, like when new podcasters, when they buy like a cheap Behringer little thing or something, it's like, it looks good because it's cheap. It's like, ooh, it's $59 or
right,
like, cheap.
Right.
But like the mic pre is like the weak link, and it's just it just kind of really cramps the audio.
I always giggle. If it doesn't have enough little shiny lights, it's probably cheap. Because normally shiny lights are meant to warn you of things. But yeah, no, you know what? And it's true. People buy sort of nothing against any of these companies, right? I know a lot of people that buy PreSonus and the entry-level Behringers. And you know what? They get the job if you're just getting going.
Right.
But if you're any kind of podcaster, you'll notice, and you know this from doing posts, that as soon as I had a really crappy mic. The minute I got this, it took me to another level. Now I felt like I needed an interface that would take most advantage of this ability of this microphone, and the one I had didn't do it. The minute I plugged this thing in, everything to me just sounded crisper. That's the word I'm looking for, crisp.
Yeah.
It wasn't about better, but it just sounded crisp. And I literally did a test just plugging them into the other interface back and forth, and you could significantly hear how it takes the additional information that the mic's capture is giving it. And so, find what you like. Everybody's voice is different, but I'm really, really happy with Focusrite so far.
Do you ever have guests on your podcast come into your studio and you sit there face to face with someone else?
Not in a long time. When I first started, I did that. My first 4 episodes of All Things Post was actually done, believe it or not, in Audacity in a studio.
Nice.
With Alex Wadsworth, he actually was the guy who owns the studio, and he's going to be handling the YouTube track over here at Podfest coming up. But once I went home, 90% of my show was via Skype calls, with guests across the nation as we try to grow our audience. But I have had the chance to interview people in a mobile setting, using a Tascam digital recorder and then taking these pro mics with me instead of using the little handheld. And that's the most I've done as far as bringing somebody face-to-face with me. 90% of my show is either via Skype or nowadays all the different softwares I can record.
Right. Okay. So now you're recording in Logic Pro 10, and now the Behringer X-touch controller, which I just looked up and saw a picture of it, you use that obviously in post, right?
Yeah, what happened with that was I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to work with Logic or any DAW, and when you're doing it with your mouse, yes, you can automate and you can do all this stuff, but after a while, I missed buttons. I came up in the old school. I'm not a kid. I'm 44 years old, right? So I'm used to SSL boards. I came up working in TV stations, and what I found after a while, as much as I love digital, was I missed turning knobs. I kind of missed pushing sliders, and what the X-touch by Behringer provided, and the reason I bought it was specifically because it had all the automation features on the board that would make it so I never have to touch my mouse again if I don't want to. So I could then switch between, I feel like being a digital baby today, or I kind of want to be an engineer again, and I want to turn the knob, and I want to nudge my stuff manually.
Right.
And I'll be honest with you, at first I wouldn't use it a lot. It was just a lot of pretty lights at first and an automated fader control.
Right.
Now I can't live without it. I'm constantly on it, and I feel like I'm truly touching the DAW versus just clicking on a mouse, if that makes any kind of sense at all.
Yeah. So what it is a controller, and if you're listening to this and you're not sure what a controller is, it connects USB, right?
Yeah, USB.
Yeah.
And it basically can be used with different DAWs. In particular, the reason I bought this one is it specifically works with Logic, so it mapped itself immediately. And I love it, man. I really love it. And you know what I found? The people that have come in here for post-engineering, not recording, but they're in here with me to mix or master or whatever, whether it's film or even production, they really love this unit. At first, they're like, what is this thing? And after once they play with it, they really love this unit.
Yeah. And the cool thing about controllers is you can map the buttons and the faders to various buttons and faders in the software. So then, like you said, instead of picking up your mouse and like clicking and dragging and all that, you just grab a knob or push a fader on this controller.
And I get it. There's a lot of people, hey Skrillex, that they work in a laptop, and there's a lot of people that they came out of school, right, producing right out of a laptop or whatever. But if you've ever worked on a board, if you've ever worked with the tactile feel, I think after a while you miss that. And I've gotten a lot of people that come in here and just go, dude, I totally didn't think I liked this thing. I love turning the knobs. I love feeling the DAW. I feel like I'm truly engineering versus just clicking. So it's really more of how it makes you feel, I guess, in your workflow than being a cool little toy that's a USB controller.
Right. Although I'm sure it does, you figured out how to make it save you time, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can automate live. Back in the day, you had to finish recording and then automate.
Right.
You can automate. You can write it live, and once you learn it, it could do so many things for you. So I certainly recommend people to at least take a look at it. I mean, can't hurt to at least look into it. I was shocked that Behringer made this. I was going to buy any other name brand. I haven't had the best experiences in my career with Behringer, but this little thing is amazing, and recommend to anybody to just at least check it out online. I think it's dropped significantly in price since I bought it. I think now it's just a few $100. I bought it for about $800. I think it's probably now like $5 or $6.
I think $450. I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's come down a little bit. I've had it for about a year and a half now. So,
got it.
But I really enjoy it, and you could tie 2 and 3 of these things together and make a very big board if you're that guy.
That is cool. And it's got what, 8 faders, 8 channels on there, and one rotary knob. So what my first question would be, because I don't have one of these controllers yet, but now that I got my iMac Pro and like I haven't started using it for my main production yet, but I'm close, like literally a couple weeks away. But I know I'm gonna want something like a controller, whether it's this one or another one. But I was just thinking, like, that rotary knob on each channel, like, when you're like EQing something, can you like, does that rotary knob just sort of map to whatever EQ you're using?
Absolutely. It maps, but not only that, you also have the jog shuttle you could scrub and pre-check. This will let you automate and ride live with the knobs. Just the automated automation was like my first, like, oh my God, I never have to do that with my fingers again. Yeah. Another thing it has, this is going to sound so geeky, but it's actually also a USB powered port separately, so you can I power my my Oxygen keyboard and other devices right off the back of this thing, because it actually has the power to actually power full powered USB, not kind of powered USB. So I have my machine, the machine MK2 here for groove production, beat production. All of this is being powered by my X-touch. So it eliminates me having to go into the back of the iMac and taking up ports, and I can just plug it right into this. So everything that's audio based, I now map over to the X-touch, and it can actually control it through MIDI if I wanted it to. I just haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay. Yeah. It's so cool. Like, controllers are, because one thing, I just bought that Rogue Amoeba. There's a new app they have called Farrago or Farrago.
I heard of that, but I haven't had. Yeah,
it's like a sound clip thing. Like, literally just released like within the last week, and it's like a little soundboard. You can play sound clips right on your computer, nice. and I like that. But the thing is, like, right now, I'm running all my production through a Mackie mixer, like an analog mixer, and the thing I love doing is, because I do the show as if it's live. When I actually fade out my theme music live.
Right.
And so
I love you.
If I'm right. So if I'm using some sort of a sound clip player in the computer, like, I was trying to think, like, well, how am I going to fade that? Like, am I going to grab it with the mouse and try to fade it down? Well, what happens if my hand slips and it just like goes all the way down real quick? It's like, that's stupid.
So you realize that you just amassed massive cool points with me right now, because there's no one. I've worked with a lot of podcasters over the past year, and no one is doing that anymore. Everybody's doing post production. They're adding their music in post, and I get it. It's cleaner. You have full control of everything, but you also have to spend hours after you're done. In your case, if you learn the craft a little better, you're pre-mixing, you're doing it live. You're done when we're done. You just maybe have to clip here and there or take out a curse word or whatever, but it's an art form, man. It's getting lost. And I think that everything being so easy and it's scaring me. I've seen young music producers run circles around me in some degree as far as being able to put something together, right? They can sequence amazingly fast. But I've also sat in the room watching them tear up because they can't mix for nothing, because they've never had to. They've never had to.
Right.
So I think what you're doing, obviously, over time you might want to, move from the analog mixer to get something like an X-touch that still gives you that tactile fader control, but it's actually working in the DAW live.
Right.
Of course, like you said, it's a little risk there, right? You're going live, but you're affecting the DAW immediately. But I love it, man. It makes you better. It makes you better at what you do. And big shout out to Behringer, honestly, for making this thing. I don't know the number. I don't know if it's X32. I saw the big brother of this when we were premiering the Messengers in New York City at CBS Radio. They have the big brother of the X-touch there. Oh. And I took a picture of it and I posted it. I said, hey, Rode, I own the little brother. Yeah. And not Rode, I'm sorry, Behringer.
Oh,
Behringer. Right. And they responded. They were like, wow. And I was like, I didn't even know the big brother existed until I had this one. And then now when I was there, I immediately knew how to use it. And so that's one thing I did like. So for listeners out there just looking for any kind of controller, there's a ton of them out there. I just felt that this one was so expandable because you can daisy chain them and different devices. So, give yourself the most ability to control your workflow. That's kind of how I decide when I purchase gear.
Right. You're right. And there's a shuttle wheel. There's also play, stop, rewind. Yeah. Like, that's so cool. You can just hit play,
But it has overwrite, trim, automation. You can nudge. One thing I hate about, I shouldn't say hate, sorry, Apple. One thing I don't like a lot about Logic is when you're trying to move your waveform left to right. You have to zoom in a lot to be able to do the very finite moves. The more you zoom out, then it kind of like snaps the grid, right? With this thing, you hit the nudge button and it can nudge in infinitely small amounts or it can nudge in big amounts. So what ends up happening is if you're fine-tuning a song or a very hefty mix that's hundreds of layers deep, you can really hone in using the nudge. And it's probably my favorite feature on this entire thing. I use it all the time to really fine tune when things should come in, sound effects should come in right on time. So there you go, Behringer, love ya.
Yeah, that is cool. All right, so that's the Behringer X-touch controller. I think there's definitely a controller in my future, and before I buy one, I'll research them a little more. Like especially with that Farrago app from Rogue Amoeba that I just got, I got to make sure that whatever controller I use will actually be able to control that little sound clip in Farrago, right? So
yeah,
because that'd be a bummer if I bought a controller and then it doesn't work with the Farrago.
Or you put out a great YouTube video just to say it doesn't and get millions of hits and save everybody else money.
Oh man. So let's get into Logic Pro and the mixing. Post-production is your specialty, and that's what I find, see, people who are really good with audio production and who have a lot of experience. I mean, recording things properly is a golden rule of audio engineering, but like once you know how to do that, it's like that's done, you're done. But then the artistry comes in the post-production, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about Logic Pro. I mean, obviously you don't just bring up the tracks and move a couple faders and then render it.
Exactly.
Talk to me about plugins, man. What are you using?
Wow, bro. That's I feel like you just took my breath away. Like that's like the loaded question of all time, right? Because nowadays, right, there's so many amazing third-party plugins. I before I jump into it, I will jump right into Logic because I know you have precious time. But I started in Pro Tools, so I'm always fighting the Pro Tools guys because I use Logic, right? And most of the time when I do films or anything, people are like, "Why did you do it in Logic when you could have just used Pro Tools?" And I wanted to just share the only reason that I fell in love with Logic the way that I am in love with Logic is because it was an amazing sequencer back when I was producing music and I needed to sequence better than mix.
Got it.
At the time, Pro Tools was more about mixing. It was a better mixer than anything else. But nowadays with the power tools, I mean, they have automated drummers in Logic. I can literally just say, I want to pick a drummer that sounds like this, and he'll do it. And he'll keep up with me, and he'll change and do whatever live. It's very AI-ish. But as far as like you're talking about plugins, I'm a big fan of Waves. I use a lot of the Waves plugins. We use a lot the iZotope RX software to isolate noise, background noise. It's total overkill on a podcast, but we used it more in the messengers and other films. But
right.
I use some stuff that I think is way more basic. Like some people like just big name plugins. I like plugins that just flat out work.
Right.
So sometimes, I'll actually go and get the actual Focusrite plugins that not just came with my unit as a freebie, but I'll look into their library of plugins, and they've got a lot of people really sleep on the plugins that were designed by your interface company. Right. Because we just want to buy what's popular and what sounds really cool, right? But I have really found that there are some gems in like the Focusrite plugins. They have like a red plugin, they call it. And I've gotten some, I think it's Softube that I use too. That's really great. So I just have, a variety.
Right. Yeah. The red that there's even there's a red 2 and a red 3 that come with the 2i2. So if you're listening and you have a 2i2, Focusrite red 2 is an EQ and a red 3 is a compressor, and they're both really nice.
And actually, people sleep on that compressor. Okay, like I have high-end compressors, and I can't tell you how many times I've come across a file. Let's say a lot of times it's more like the stuff we shoot live with wireless. Right. Wireless introduces its own issues, obviously, and the frequency range of everything. And I've used that plugin as a first pass compressor. Just like, let me see, let me just drop it in there to see as a first pass. And a lot of times it does it beautifully, and I don't even need to open up my high-end other plugins to do it. Right. You really got to notice that today, every company's competing for your attention, and they're putting in a lot of time and money. So most people that have a 2i2 will never even use those. They don't even download them. And it's such a mistake. It's such a mistake.
And I find I was messing with the Red 3 plugin, and I had to, a couple times I had to like use a really long release time on certain things because kind of like, it's almost like manually doing what Auphonic would do, like leveling different voices on the same track. So, if you set the release really long, like literally 3 seconds long, it'll literally compress the loud person and then it won't touch the lower volume person. And for some reason, that Red 3 plugin does it really well.
Yeah, and I have other plugins that don't. And so that's I mean, like I said, we could talk all day about the name brands, and I surely value Waves and all the research they put in Softube and these guys. But don't ignore sometimes these simple ones. And who's amazing is I think it's Mark Johansson that has that Facebook group where he's constantly promoting all the plugins that podcasters can use. I'm trying to remember. Please forgive me, Mark, for forgetting the name of the
it's a Podcast Gear Group.
Podcast Gear Group. Thank you. What an amazing resource. I can't tell you how many times I've been up in the middle of the night mixing, go to there just to look and get my mind off the audio. And he's like, hey, today they're selling X plugin for $99. And I literally have bought it. And it's like, boom, thank you, dude. You're amazing. You know, but you know, I try not to use to wrap up the plugin. And I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm a person, and this doesn't always play well with others, okay? But I've been taught by guys that in real recording studios for many years that didn't have plugins. So I was always taught to process as little as I have to, record as amazing as I can. So a lot of people that come to work with me, they'll realize that I actually try my hardest to not have to do much processing if I don't have to. I won't compress just because I need to compress for no reason, just to add a compressor. Like I think people just put so much stuff and they start to really bog down their system. I think you need to always remember that I say the word I'm trying to say is like you're forming a sound, you're shaping a sound, and you should use the right tools to shape the sound, not just be like, well, in engineering school, they taught me I should always compress my vocal. And I think that that's not real. I think if you're a really good equalizer, you're a person that knows how to really use EQs and parametric EQs and all that stuff, you can accomplish so much before you have to then go to a higher level of processing. So that's my tip to people is, you know, if you just really try up front, you can avoid some. Of course, you still have to process, but why process just for the sake of processing? It's the same for video for me putting visual effects on things. If it wasn't shot awesome and I can't tell a movie with the story I got, no amount of effects is going to make it better.
Right? That's a good analogy. And yeah, compression is the one thing that, you know, like EQ, like I think I probably use an EQ on every single voice that I record ever. Like just because there's always some small tweak I want to make, and mostly not because it might sound bad, but a lot of times it's because like if it's two voices and one of them, let's say voice A sounds awesome, like almost like a voiceover guy with like a lot of low end, and then there's voice B, let's say it's someone else and they don't have a lot of low end, and therefore they don't sound good together. So I might take out some of the low end of person A, even though it sounds awesome, but I'll take out some low end just so it matches person B better. And so that's why a lot of times why I use EQ pretty much on every voice ever. Yeah,
and that makes sense because not everybody's voice sounds the same on the mic. You might be using the same mic with we talked earlier, different voices will sound totally different on the same microphone, and EQing will often fix that. And obviously compression is like my next go-to, right? Like compression matters. I just see so many and I don't want to say young producers because I've seen some talented young producers, but I see a lot of people out there just over processing. Does that make sense? Like they're just processing because someone told them that's the chain. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
They saw it on YouTube or something.
Yeah.
They're not trusting their ear.
Right. Well, it's hopefully they're learning. I mean, that's the mark of an amateur, right? You just sort of throw on stuff because you can.
I was just training not to call my brother out, but I'm calling you out, okay? My brother's an amazing, talented editor, but so he's moving into helping me with some audio here and there when he can. And my other audio engineer, Ralph Lugo, he's done albums. The guy's ear is trained ridiculous. He hears things I can't hear. But I was having fun today, yelling and like hitting my brother's hand with a ruler, saying, "Don't you hear that? Don't you hear that?" And it hit him when he was leaving. And he's like, "Wow, my ear's not trained, and now I'm starting to hear it." And so I think that's one of the, like you said, mark of a pro is, and the same for video editing, right? Do you see that?
Right.
But yeah, definitely train your ear and train your eye before you just go and start dropping plugins, because plugins can be amazing tools. They can also crush your signal and make it for a muddy mix. So just be careful.
Yeah, and the other mark of someone who's learning, let's put it that way, is that you might want, let's say you want to add some low frequencies to a voice to make it sound bigger and awesome. And what you do is you add way too much. So there's
that's easy to do.
Yeah, it's easy to do, but like when the more you learn and the more you hear things, like you might add a lot just to hear it and say, "Ooh, that sounds awesome." But then you'll back it down to where it should be, and then it sounds really good, not overdone.
And to make your point, how do you know where it should be if you haven't trained your ear on what sounds balanced? Right. So I know it's your show, but what DAW are you using primarily? What do you work on?
I actually use Reaper.
Oh, nice.
Just because it's simple and easy, and I just got it and tried it, but I have, so obviously the way I make things sound good is with plugins. So. I mean, I don't rely on Reaper for anything. Trust me, I don't. It's just a tool for me, and then the plugins is what does it.
Right. I just had a friend cut an entire movie in iMovie. I totally get it.
Yeah.
It's not the tool, it's you, buddy.
Exactly. And it's just like, and again, it's podcasting too, so it's not like I'm, cutting a record with.
Although I do think podcasting gives audio engineers that are getting a start a great practice session, right? Like a great way to start learning how to balance vocal. And if you're a serial type podcast where it's a storyteller podcast with lots of effects and stuff, I think that even adds to the advanced post-production for that. But I've gotten to the point that, I use podcast editing when I want to practice, when I want to shape someone's voice or make them sound as good as I can. I use it to practice a lot of EQ. But a lot of what we do nowadays, though, is so much Foley and stuff that your ear is just all over the place. So you really can't assign one plugin across the board. Everything has to be done individually.
Right. And Foley, of course, for those listening who don't know, that's when they make sound effects for some video that's already shot, right?
Yeah, afterwards, right? You're like, I actually had a recent documentary where they shot it with a lot of GoPro, and GoPro's known for, horrible sound. Right. And so we ended up these guys were climbing up Mount Kilimanjaro, and we had to take a box of sand and record a shoe moving within it to try to recreate the sound of their feet walking through sand. So, we run the gamut over here at Wildstyle Media.
Right. Whenever I see like an old Western and like someone's walking and you hear like their spurs like clinking and clanking, I'm always like, that's definitely Foley.
And it never changes though. Back in those days, they just used the same spur over and over again. Today in post, we make it go left speaker, right speaker, surround speaker, right? Raise and lower the volume, even change the pitch of that spur each time just so it sounds like a human foot, right?
Totally.
Yeah, man.
So Waves, I like Waves as well. In fact, most of my plugins are Waves. Which, do you have any favorite Waves plugins?
God, not really.
Okay.
I've had the entire set. My buddy Ralph, he has their entire Waves collection. Cool. And what's funny too is for me, we do use a lot of the Waves plugins, but lately since we've had the Machine MK2, which is primarily like a beat machine for making music, right. but the I guess it's called Machina, not Machine. Their DAW is really killer and has a lot of really amazing plugins by them. And so a lot of times lately I've been messing with that because it's all new to me. And it's they right. sound new and exciting and different because they're mainly for like dubstep and stuff like that, but they're filters and great plugins. So, we've had the Waves bundle forever, and but I've actually lately been using a lot of the stuff that's just built into Apple. Their recent updates, just their Apple plugins are really great.
Right, in Logic Pro.
Yeah, in the new X. They just had an update yesterday, and they added all kinds of exciters, and they're partnering with third-party companies now as well. But their in-house stuff now is becoming really robust to where I've been using my Waves less and less.
Right. Yeah, Waves. Like I know I bought the Gold bundle like years ago.
Yeah, I've had the Gold bundle for a while.
Some of the bundles are good. It's like they give you a bunch of different plugins and they're good. But like over the past, I'd say 3 years, I've really. Here and there, I'll buy like Waves always has deals for $29.
Phone ringing,
and like you'll find the CLA2A, right? It's a compressor. It's a knockoff of the classic LA2A, which is right. like one of the most classic compressors ever in the music business, and it's really good, and it's got two knobs. One is the gain reduction, one is the gain, and it's like it's easy to use, but it kind of has like an automated like attack and release time, so it's easy to use, but it works really well, and it's like, so that's one that I use a lot, and there's other ones like that too, like the plugins that are modeled after classic gear. Those are the ones I use. I rarely use anything just from Waves itself.
Right, and back in the day, like. I used to work in Reason a lot, and the reason I like that is they would have all those modules that looked like classic gear, right? It would model it, and but the thing about plugins, again, they're very subjective, and a lot of people that like produce music, a lot of times will make sort of the mistake of only using that same plugin pack when they're working with more vocal or Foley, and actually. It's not the same. You know what I'm saying? Right. Some plugins are actually designed with what you're doing in mind. So I did like Slate Digital, I believe is they have an incredible set of Slate plugins that recently my engineers really been getting into. I haven't had the opportunity, but all I hear him is running around the room. And a shout out to Anything Audible, my friend Lee Riley on the All Things Post Facebook group. He's always telling us about Slate and how we should try using that. And recently a friend of mine got into that, and he's been running around his studio pulling his hair going, oh my God, sorry, Waves, you can't touch this. Right? So we just kind of all learn from trial and error out there, you know?
Yeah. I recently was looking at the Slate. It's called an everything bundle. It's like you pay. Yeah. Well, if you pay for a whole year, it basically works out to like $15 a month, and you get every single plugin they make.
Everything they've got. Yeah.
And I really wanted to try it, and I might try it. I didn't rule it out yet, but actually I didn't see an expander or a gate in there, and they had one de-esser. So, I mean, that's okay. You usually only need one, but I might try that in the future.
But again, maybe if you're not doing some serious stuff, you could use a lot of the ones that come in your DAW. And then use those other plugins to sort of round about the sound. And you're probably saying, Neil, why do you keep coming back to what's in the DAW? And I guess the only reason I say that is I know so many music producers and engineers, and a lot of them are coming back to me when we chit-chat as friends and just, what are you using this week? Or did you find anything cool? What did you use in that mix? And more of them are telling me, dude, I've been using, whatever, all these other plugins, and I didn't know all along in Studio One, there's this great plugin that does this. And we just overlook it because we're like, oh, it's part of the inbox sound. But these companies, they're all competing so heavily to get you off of what you're on and onto theirs. They're teaming up with people to do amazing plugins. And you should really look at that before you buy your next Pro Tools or your next Logic or your next Studio One. Look to see who's bundling, because that's why I went with Logic Pro.
Right.
Got amazing stuff.
I think that's true. I think even Adobe Audition is stepping up their plugins as well.
Because you know what? So many more people are using them for film, post, and stuff like that. And so they're smart, and they're starting to partner with major companies and developing stuff not only for within Audition, but also, I call it the name brand. They also put it in, like I know recently in Final Cut Pro, which is also Apple, they're starting to put in the Logic plugins into Final Cut.
Right.
So now if you know Logic or you're used to Logic, you can now work in Final Cut Pro, start doing mixing within the video software and still use many, many of the same plugins that you have. So they're, I don't know. I just tell people don't sleep on these companies.
Yeah, one exception I would probably say is like Reaper, because Reaper is not really competing with Logic Pro and Audition and stuff. So Reaper has its own suite of plugins, but I'd bet the farm that they're nowhere near as good as anything that's stock in Logic Pro or Audition. Yeah,
and depending what you're doing, like I like to use a lot of Native Instruments plugins that were, that come, like I said, with the machine because they're new to me. And some of them are specifically for music. And I'm kind of breaking what I just said of, hey, don't use the music for vocal. But I think there's a point when you're an engineer, and I hope engineers out there that know this are nodding their head, yes. I think when you're learning, you need to stay tried and true to things. But there's a point when you become so well-versed at what you're doing that you can start experimenting and going nuts. And then you become a Timberland. And you're like, yeah, I used that crazy effect that was designed for something totally different, because I'm actually shaping and creating my own sound library. So I think I like to experiment now that I'm getting a lot older, because I'm trying to create a lot of my own custom blends. Like, I like to use this and this plugin combined to create this unique sound. And regardless of what I'm using it on, that combo of that gate and that this and that creates this every time. So I think now I'm to the point where I'm like a chef, and I'm trying to get creative with my omelet, and I'm just trying to try different things. But I don't recommend it to people that are just getting started, because you're going to train your ear wrong. I think you really have to be trained to then start to know the difference, like you were talking about low end or high fidelity, and when should I add this and when should I add some swing and play with the panning, all things that most people don't do.
Definitely in the beginning, just get a good sound, find your signal chain, your plug-in chain that works, and then, but like I agree with you, like guys like you and me. I mean, I'm always experimenting. I'm like, what if I add this plug-in, and what about this? So it's that, and that's part of learning. That's part of like staying fresh and staying
on top of your game.
Staying on your game. That's it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Like I said, plugins to me are no different than visual effects. There are things that add for you to shape your sound or add to your video. But I really think that if you want to master the craft of audio is try to do as much as you can without relying on anything, and then start to add what's missing or what you need to shape the sound that you are imagining. I guess I'm just a big proponent of don't process to just process.
Yeah.
Learn what it's like to mix it raw and then say, I need this plugin to create this effect or desired result.
Right.
And that's when I think you become a master, because you could undo it. You could uncheck stuff and literally tell me what's changing. Oh, look at the limiter. Look at the channel EQ. Look at this. I added this, what do you call it? Space, what's the one that I use a lot? Space Designer or whatever. And I can uncheck them and tell you exactly what I'm undoing. Not just, I just added it and it sounded really cool. I mean, look at reverb. I mean, without getting too deep into reverb, but there's a billion reverbs out there. I'm still a lot of times just using the good old fashioned, simple reverb, right? The simple ones.
Right.
But I know friends of mine that have paid bucks for high end reverbs, but they really know what they're doing.
Right.
And I think that you just have to know what you're doing when you're doing sound. You really are sound designing. You're not just. Otherwise, I think you're just an amateur that's just dropping cool sounds and you think you know what you're doing.
Yeah, recently I just tried out, and I bought it, actually. It's a Waves plugin, but it's called Sheps Omni Channel. It's a channel strip with a bunch of different modules. It has everything, like literally it has a preamp with saturation, it has filters, it has an EQ, obviously, compressor, 3 different kinds of compressors. It has a gate, an expander, and also it has 2 de-essers, and it has a limiter. Like, it's really probably the first channel strip I've ever seen that literally probably has everything you would ever need, and it's very high quality. So what I did is I A/B'd it against my current signal chain, like for my voice for this show. So for my voice for this show, I think I probably use about 5 plugins, and I've, over time I've tweaked them and to where I'm always trying to make my voice sound better. And
you sound very attractive, just so you know.
I mean, every podcast, every voice, I'm always trying to make it sound better. But I sort of mimicked the settings with this Sheps Omni channel, and it got real close. It sounded almost exact, and
it sounds good.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, I'll probably. But here's the thing: I'm not going to use the Sheps Omni channel on my voice, because even though I got it close, I still like the custom chain that I designed better. Because, like I said, it's got I'm using an SSL channel strip, then I'm using like an 1176 compressor, and I'm using the Fab Filter EQ, the Pro Q2. Like I'm using like the best of the best in a chain, and I think that's what I've chosen and what I've used is a little better than the Sheps Omni channel, but just barely. So.
Yeah, but again, you knew how to mix and match stuff to reach that desired result. And that's kind of what I just really like to, pound into your audience is you could have also said, I just tried a couple of different plugins and I like the way it sounds, versus what you said. You were like, I made my own custom blend to mimic something else, and I think it's better. How would you know that? How do you know it's better? So that makes you a badass. But my thing is, I just really respect that in people. I never mind hearing people say they've dropped 50 plugins, as long as they can tell me why every single one of those
Right.
is on there. And that's all I believe in. And I do that too, to raise the bar for people. Otherwise, everybody's generic. What makes a Jedi? I mean, is it the fact that they have the sword, or the fact that they mastered how to use it?
The Force.
The Force. So that's my moment of like total inspiration. You could totally use that to open the show. What makes a Jedi?
That's cool. I don't do that,
Just
but
kidding.
I should this time. That's awesome.
Just kidding. I just haven't.
Hey, iZotope RX. So now, again, I know you're working on films and videos and live stuff for film, but as far as the podcasting goes, what are you actually using iZotope RX for?
We only use it a little bit for the podcasting. I would have to really give the iZotope RX1 to my engineer, Ralph Lugo. He
got it.
He gets in there and he sometimes will isolate air conditioners, people that recorded with their AC a little too loud, or they have a 60 cycle hum in their line, or basic standard stuff. Now, here's the thing. Most noise reduction that comes built into most DAWs will lessen that stuff, but it will not eliminate it. One thing about iZotope RX, it isolates that frequency if you record some room tone, or if you can record like 6 to 10 seconds of the problem audio, and it will damn near eliminate it.
Right.
There's a point where he sometimes has processed it that he says, "Oh, I had to process and get a tiny bit tinny to get it all out."
Yeah.
But obviously we avoid that. But that's what we use it for. Is traditionally it's air conditioning, hums, severe background noises.
Yeah, that's how I use it too. I use it for, like, I call it cleanup. Like when you record the track, and then like EQ and compression and mixing, that comes later. But first, I take each track of every voice individually, and I'll clean it up. I'll remove any noise, remove any hums, and then just get it to where it's clean enough. So now, as an engineer, I feel ready that I could start twisting EQ knobs and adding.
And that makes perfect sense, because otherwise you're EQing noise, you're compressing noise, and then when you raise your gain, which people think is a volume knob, they then raise those noise levels up, and then you want to try to clean that noise that's now being affected by the other plugins, and then you'll think that the cleanup software doesn't work effectively. And what you said is actually the right way: is first we clean, then you enhance. Then
right. So editing in Logic Pro, I do all my detailed editing, which I call it, or waveform editing, some people call it. I do it in SoundForge Pro. It's just a simple, mono or stereo.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I've been using it since the late 90s. Obviously, it's
I used SoundForge when I first started, so hoorah, man.
It's just like, it's so simple. It's just like, boom, you bring in a stereo track or a mono track, and you can zoom in and edit, and just it's quick for me. That's why I use it. Yeah. But how do you do like that detailed editing in Logic Pro? And the reason I'm asking is because, like, in Reaper, for instance, you can zoom in and you can do ripple editing, but like I just don't feel like doing detailed editing in Reaper. It's just clumsy. And that's why even in like Adobe Audition, they have like the multi-track part of Audition, and then they do have like a waveform part of Audition. So in Adobe Audition, you can do both. You can have the multi-track and then mix it down, and then actually do the detailed editing in Adobe Audition. But how does it work in Logic Pro?
Oh, we just hire a pro. No. I just had to do that, dude. I was waiting for you to finish. I'm like,
I know.
He's so walking into this one.
I know.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. With Logic Pro, I like to do, I don't like to call it the advanced editor, but they do have, up at the top of where all the little buttons are, for those of you that don't use Logic Pro, they have like a scissor icon. And when you click on that, it opens up a detailed advanced editor. So while you're looking at the waveform in its normal height and stuff in the timeline, when you click on that, it allows it to blow up significantly, and it allows you to really, really get in and fine tune it. You can also just zoom into the regular timeline. However, in this editor, there's just other additional tool sets that allow you to be able to expand it more and really start to shape it and keyframe and do all that stuff you want to do. That's really, like, we get in pretty deep. When it comes to film, they don't play around. Film is not forgiving. So we use that, I call the advanced editor, a ton in our work.
Got it.
For podcasting, I hardly ever go there. I do what you were saying. I just kind of zoom in my timeline, get in there and do some simple shaping or keyframing or whatever. But when we want to go deep, we go into the advanced editor in Logic.
Okay. All right. And you take, which Tascam recorder do you sometimes take on the road?
We are 100% using the DR701D because it has SMPTE timecode for video as well as all the Pro audio. We were using what was the number? DR60D, I believe was the model. Sort of an entry level. I had opportunity to help them develop a sort of podcast friendly device called the Tascam UR72. You might have seen it. It's like a white interface, and it lets you sort of do what you're doing, live audio effects live while you're producing, and it has like an on-ear button, and it's designed to produce podcasts live. So for helping them with that, they introduced me to the 701D. They kind of told me what it can do, and so we picked one up. It's about $500, I think it was, that we paid for it, and it's amazing. It has XLR inputs. It also has quarter inputs, 1/8-inch inputs, SMPTE timecode. It can go up to 48K, 96. Like, it can go up really high, really pro, and it's like super durable, and it records to an SD card as well as sending back to the camera. So it just has a lot of options, and it's all over my Instagram. I'm constantly taking pictures of that thing because I just. It's very adaptable to both audio and video. I've used it for audio only recordings as well.
Nice. All right, and since you're a badass video editor, let's just give us the is there a speed round we can do for your video editing?
Sure, and thanks for calling me that because I thought I sucked.
No, dude, The Messenger's documentary, dude.
Yeah,
Crazy.
Thank you for that, man. I hope everybody goes to see it. It's on Amazon.
Awesome, yeah. So what software do you use for that?
Okay, so quick video editing. We are a Final Cut Pro house here because I love Apple, but I have recently been spending a lot of time in Adobe Premiere. Reason being is we've been passing up some projects that were started in Premiere, so they don't want to be moved and converted to Final Cut. But I am a Final Cut editor, love Final Cut Pro. We use a lot of After Effects, and we use Motion 5 by Apple for simple motion graphics. We do the rest of our audio in Logic, and if I can control it, I do Final Cut and After Effects all day. That's kind of my two power tools in the video world.
So After Effects, obviously, they're after you shoot the video. It's effects that you can add. What are they in general?
After Effects is really powerful for visual effects. It's also for designing amazing titles. If you want to have, for example, a big shout out to Rampant Design Tools. They create After Effects like fire, smoke, embers. So you can add fire to your project. It looks like an explosion happened. So After Effects is where they make all the visual effects for much of the scripted television that you watch. Motion 5 is more for like simple motion graphics, flying letters, pictures moving around, things, logos growing and shrinking, things like that. And then Final Cut's where we sort of cut it all together. We bring in the elements. Now, what I used to love back when I was in Avid is that you could round trip, right? You could send things from one to the other. And in Adobe, you still can. You can go from Premiere right to After Effects. And when you go back to Premiere, whatever you change will automatically change on your Premiere timeline. So for a lot of editors, that alone is worth the cost of whatever Adobe's selling. But I'm hoping Apple will do that soon. Otherwise, they will force people like me to move to the Adobe space because of the ability to round trip and save steps and not have to export things, then go back to the new software, import it, and then re-export it out.
Got it. All right, I have one last question, but before that, I just want to remind everyone, Niel Guilarte, founder of Wildstyle Media. Website is wildstylemedia.net. Obviously, the links will be in the show notes. So, Neil, when you go to see the new Star Wars movies when they come out and stuff, do you sit there and are you able to pick apart the actual film production the same way I would pick apart a song in audio only?
Yes, but I stopped doing that.
Really?
When I was I shouldn't say when I was. I sound like I'm Gandalf and I'm giving up. But back when I started in film, especially when I was starting to learn visual effects, I could not see anything. I could tell you it was green screen, it was matted, whatever they did. What that ended up doing was not only pissing off everyone I go to the movies with, because I'm a monster Batman fan, right? And every time I see Batman, I would just tear it apart. But now I've really realized that for me to actually enjoy Star Wars, I end up watching these movies twice. I watch them once for the sheer enjoyment, because I forget that the reason I got into this was because those movies made me dream and imagine. Then I go back and watch it, normally by myself or with an editor buddy, and we rip the shred out of it. But I've really tried hard now in my elder years to listen to music and watch films for how they were meant to be enjoyed. And then I go back in as an engineer and go, I wonder how they did that mix, or I wonder how they did that. Because when it ends up killing our enjoyment of it, because we know what's behind the curtain. And so I guess I'm trying hard to get back to enjoying the craft. But then if I meet someone like you, which that's why this has been so fun for me, then I can geek out. I have no one. I think you're the first person I've talked to in a year, technical, because they're either asking me about my podcast or business tools or whatever, coaching. It's not often, believe it or not, I have a podcast that's all about post-production, and I've only been interviewed on 2 podcasts about production, yours and Command Edit. And so it's funny, right? It's what I do, but it's what I'm least interviewed about.
Right.
And so I just think it's important for you to still love watching E.T. and then tear it apart.
Yeah, and I think that's another sign of a professional is you can turn it off. I can, like in the beginning, it's hard to turn it off. It's hard to turn off your critical.
Yeah. It's impossible to turn it off.
Yeah. But as you go, you could turn it off because it's like, okay, it's like I could listen to podcast. I mean, as long as the podcast I'm listening to isn't completely horrendous, I can live with it. As long as it's good enough, I can live with it. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I've already pretty much scanned it and been critical of it, and I can tell you what's wrong with it.
I got this. I learned it from a buddy of mine who produced music, and one day we were in the car, and he asked me, "Are you enjoying it, or are you studying it? Which one are you doing?" And I was like, "Damn!" And he's like, "When you are like me and you produce and mix and master music, you're to the point that you just can't ever enjoy the music. You're always studying it." And so he was the one that always encouraged me because he couldn't turn it off. So he was like, "I really implore you to listen to it before you study it."
Yeah. See, I think he could. I think everyone can. I almost think it's just a decision in your mind, like, and almost like just put it. I don't know. Maybe it's just being more consciously aware and being like having more control over your mind, just to put something on the back burner and then just enjoy it. Like, I think everyone can do that. I think it just takes a little effort. That's all.
Yeah. And like anything, right? Like you just said, a chef is going to treat food differently. We treat audio and video differently. But in the end, what matters, and I always hope, is that people that are mixing, mastering, learning the tools that you're talking about on the show is that they're trying to make high quality content. And not just I get really discouraged with podcasters that, and I get it. They promote that you can podcast through your phone using Anchor, and you can do all this stuff through your phone. But I really kind of get a little discouraged when I see people doing the bare minimum in podcasting, because we want this podcasting medium to at one point be taken very seriously, because there's people like you and I that are service providers within this medium, and we take so much pride in it. And so, as much as I know there's always a simple DIY way, I really encourage podcasters to go to the next level, learn about microphones, record in a more isolated fashion, edit or outsource your editing, care about the level of audio quality you're doing, because otherwise you're cheapening that platform. And that's why we have to struggle so much to constantly explain to people what a podcast is. So, I just think that what we do is something that's it's important in our industry, is trying to keep a quality level. We were so proud of the Messengers because we made a movie with simple DSLR cameras, but we took painstaking efforts to make it look as much like a real documentary film that we could. And that went down to the audio mixing and everything else that we did, color correction,
Yeah. And it turned out awesome. So,
thanks,
this
buddy.
is awesome. So your show is All Things Post.
Yep.
So everyone go out and listen to All Things Post and subscribe to that. Niel Guilarte, thank you, man, for coming on the show.
Thank you. I had a blast, man. We got to do this again.
I know. And we're going to see each other next week at Podfest. Okay, although by the time this comes out, it'll be 3 weeks after Podfest.
Well, next time we'll do this in Spanish and see if you can hold on tight.
Dude! Oh, we got to do that.
Let's do it.
All right, brother. So listen, thank you for listening, everybody. Look, we've done a lot of previous sessions of the Podcast Engineering Show. Go back and listen to some old classics. It'll help you for sure. So thanks again. And Neil, you have to yell "sound great," okay? Right here.
All right.
Sound great! Yes!